thank you for joining us again on the Chicagoland Veterans Channel. I'm here today with Emanuel Barr, who is the Executive Director of the Chicago Military Talent Consortium. So Emanuel, appreciate you taking the time to join us today. So we'll go ahead and jump right into it. Why don't you start out by just giving us a little bit about your background, your time in service, and how the CMTC kind of came about.
Yeah, thanks, George. It's good to be here. Good to see you again. You and I have shared some work in CMTC, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Native Chicagoan, born on the South Side. Kind of grew up in a couple of the rough neighborhoods of the city, like Inglewood. I grew up in one. Chatham wasn't as bad then as it is now.
Right.
Catholic schoolboy, De La Salle High School. Graduated from Northern Illinois, and it was at NIU that I started. Actually, I went to boot camp, and then I came back to NIU and told them that I went to boot camp, and they were like, "We want you in ROTC. You're a leader." Da da da. So my contract shifted over into the ROTC program. I became a scholarship student there. Got my commission in ROTC, and then was a reserve officer for 8 years in the Illinois National Guard and Reserves. So when you're in a reserve, obviously you've got a full-time day job, and I worked in a number of sales organizations in Illinois, and one of them was lesser of a sales role and more of a educational partnership role. Apollo Education Group, and that's where I met you. Yep. Apollo developed some relationships with a lot of the larger corporations to help some of their employees further their academic experience and their academic criteria, their skill sets maybe needed to grow in their jobs. We had a number of academic resources for that, and we partnered with a lot of large corporations. Sears Holding was one of them. And a colleague of mine, Jackie Wilson, we worked very closely together and said, hey, there are needs around veterans. Every organization has veteran recruiting. Being a veteran myself, I had a strong passion for that. Jackie and I developed what's now known as the Chicago Military Talent Consortium. Essentially, it was just started out with a group of about 12 representatives from different companies. I think you might have even been at the first one. And from there, that organization has grown to about 35 different companies in the state of Illinois, and we meet quarterly. And we got our quarterly meeting coming up in April, so you need to be there.
So I know so many professional discussions you and I have that rotate around veteran talent acquisition and things of that nature. And I know one of your strong points is, there's so many individual efforts being made out there, but so much more good could be done from a collaborative standpoint. How do you view that? Well, how do you see that big picture where companies stop competing necessarily directly with one another and kind of figure out a way to leverage that talent pool collaboratively?
Well, that's a great way of putting that. Actually, we live in America, right? Free market. So everyone is vying for the best, car or the best job or the best talent.
Right.
And one of the things that I found, even as I, begin to work with individual companies, is they have a strong need for recruiting, and not just recruiting, but retaining, and more importantly, and this is something that doesn't get focused on as much, their succession plans. There's a lot of baby boomers entering an era in their careers where they're thinking about retiring. And just so happens that we have a large, returning citizenship of, veterans coming from overseas. Well, you and I joked about this and said it seriously. If you want to recruit a great leader, recruit a veteran.
Right.
And so, I've seen people do this in piecemeal ways. One organization that I worked with directly, I helped them develop a program for Veterans Day. What they did was, we had one of our academic speakers come in. He did a series of ways to transition your veteran skill set into the workforce, into your direct job, whether it be sales or IT or management. And he did such a phenomenal job. I thought, more people need to see this than the people just inside this company.
Right.
And so what I began to do is start to talk to different partners about what we had done. Light bulbs go off, excitement. And yet I thought, this is so sad, because we're in the free market, everybody's competing against each other, they're missing the opportunity to actually work together in learning and development, in recruiting from, the talent pool of, and there's tons of veterans out there that companies could benefit from. So that was really kind of the origins of the CMTC. Beyond just pulling companies together, it's saying, hey, listen, time out, stop competing against each other for the best talent. You're going to be able to pull from an apple tree if we were to work together collaboratively to help this population of great men and women who, by the way, have already been trained. Right? You think about your hours of training in the military and myself, it's like hundreds, thousands of hours that the federal government has already, and probably still so, right? Thousands of dollars and thousands of hours that pumped into us and invested in us. Companies don't benefit from that. Said stop competing against each other, work together for that talent pool, and everyone wins instead of just one company.
And excuse me, a point I thought that you made was a really good point with that is we constantly look at it, is in the retail sector. We're competing for talent that is, direct amongst competitors. So we don't spend a lot of time, Sears doesn't spend a lot of time working with Target, in talent acquisition because we're in direct competition with them. But the veteran community, I feel like that talent community is unique in the fact that Emanuel Barr may be a phenomenal fit for Sears Holdings and may be a horrible fit for McDonald's. So I feel like being able to collaboratively work, as you've put it, is a good thing because, in all honesty, nobody's really missing out, and there's no downside to it from what I've seen. So I want to continue down that rabbit hole just a little bit further. So one of your areas of expertise is, the Guard and the Reserves. You understand that very well. So how do you see in the Chicagoland area the Guard and the Reserve playing a role in workforce, revitalization, and what are companies doing well in the recruitment of Guardsmen and Reservists, and what are they doing poorly in your eyes?
Yeah, I think what companies are doing well is they are aligning with some of the existing organizations that are out there around job fair. What's the big job fair everyone goes to every year? It's over at UIC, Hiring Our Heroes events. Apollo has been there, my organization, Geo Group has been there, Sears has been there. So, finding the large, events for people to go do recruiting, it's kind of a low-hanging fruit, go. The very strength behind that right choice of going to Hiring Our Heroes can also be contributing to some of the Achilles heel in that. And here's what I mean. If you just go to Hiring Our Heroes, you're looking for kind of a saturation point. We're going to a place with tons of people.
Right.
Well, you got tons of people there. They may be fresh out of their jumpsuit. They may be fresh out of their college experience. They may be a Vietnam vet. So you may have a bunch of apples in the basket, but you're going to be sorting and sorting and sorting.
A huge spectrum.
Absolutely. And, for some companies, that's great. They're looking for volume and numbers and dials and interviews and so forth. Or even they're looking to diversify some of their candidates. Like a lot of companies have diversity initiatives and requirements. But other companies, let's be honest, it's a waste of time. It's a sheer waste of time, and the companies end up in their veteran recruiting division or arm spending thousands of dollars at an event where they're essentially throwing spaghetti on the wall, right? They may get one candidate interviewing, and he or she may, kind of pars out after round two. So I think one thing a company can do, and especially in Illinois, and I've done work with the Chicago Military Talent Consortium, with the companies, Sears is one of them. You guys are strong contributors. You've hosted our meetings before, and really appreciate the work that you all do and what you and Mario and some of the other team there have contributed. But what companies can do is actually go directly into the reserves unit. One of the things we've talked about in the CMTC is actually having a CMTC job fair where instead of going to Hiring Our Heroes as the CMTC, we go into a reserve or a National Guard weekend or a yellow ribbon event where people are returning home. We go in there as a group of companies and say, hey, here's 9 companies, come talk to us. Now you have 200 men and women or 400 or 100 men and women who've all just returned from Afghanistan, they've all just returned from Iraq or different parts of the world, wherever their units have been, and you're talking directly to them about what they're doing and so forth. Another thing that I think companies can and should do is invest in one more click into recruiting a veteran is the need to help their transferable skills that they use in the military or in infantry, for example, and how that relates to sales, how that relates to leadership. I think we send a lot of people out to job fairs and we take resumes.
So do you feel like that needs to be a formalized program? Is that kind of what you're saying? That skills transference?
I absolutely think a skills transference in an organization is a better investment than it is in just throwing spaghetti on the wall at a large recruiting fair. And because if a Walgreens or a Sears or a McDonald's or CDW says, we've gone to the job fairs, here's our ROI, it's low. Let's pull some money out of that next year's budget and allocate it toward creating maybe a workshop or a class or training for a class of veterans, saying, you all came to our event, you gave us your resume, now we want to show you our culture. Here's how it works, and then do a breakout and say, this is what you did, you worked in signal, this is what you did, you worked in infantry, you were a mortarman, okay, and here's how those would play into what we do. You would have a stronger communication breakout in an interview. You'd have more confidence in that interview. And then you also create an internal culture in the company of understanding veterans more. Right. You and I have talked about that before.
Yeah,
a lot of hiring managers don't know what the heck they're talking about when they're interviewing a veteran. They don't know the questions to ask. And even if the veteran answered, it might be, English to Chinese or Chinese to, German. It's like, well, I don't understand what you mean.
You're talking a deeper translation, more than just your token military skills translator, but like an actual sit-down, discussion.
A sit-down discussion. It could be a one-time. Dosage is important with anybody transitioning. Remember when you came off of the cattle cart and boot camp? I don't know if you go to Fort Benning.
No, I went to Lewis.
You go to Fort Lewis, Washington. I went to Fort Benning, Georgia. You come off the cattle car and then they start screaming at you and shouting at you, but within a day or two, you're kind of assimilated into, okay, I can no longer wear a goatee. I got to do push-ups or stand at attention. I need to salute. I need to be at parade rest. You learn that very quickly inside of a couple, 3 days. A veteran is used to that type of, structure, but we don't provide that for them. We just say, we like veterans. We're a veteran friend of the company. Come to our company, we'll take your resume. And then the attrition starts to happen immediately because there's no click over, there's no cattle car transfer.
So how do you see that working? I understand how that would work small scale. So for instance, I think CDW is a great example. That would work very, very well for them.
Right.
Because they only hire 200 or 300 people a year.
Right.
How would you adjust or scale that for a company like Sears that hires 25,000 people? How do you do that?
Once again, more money needs to be allocated into training.
Right.
And unfortunately, when you have companies ebb and flow annually, the thing that gets cut the most is training. It isn't just for veterans; it's across the board. I have a friend of mine who told me that he worked partner with his buddy. And his buddy got promoted, then he took on his responsibility and is now sharing the load with somebody else. It happens. It does happen, right? So and then your ability to do training, ask for training is very limited. Companies need to invest in that, and that was a big thing that we talked about when I was at Apollo. It's like, hey, if you want to hire the best, you have to be willing to train them, and if you don't have the best, then you need to invest in the people you have so that they can maybe not be the best, but so that they can become better. Right? So that's what it's training knowledge. It always ends up to how much money you're willing to put into how much skin in the game you have.
Exactly. So collaboration, investment in learning and development, and you'll do better. I think that's the short message here. So Emanuel, I appreciate you taking the time today to come talk to us, and we certainly appreciate your expertise and insight.
Absolutely.
And for everyone, thank you for taking the time to watch.